A little over a year ago, a relative of my wife's passed away in his 70s. One of his best friends was his sulcata, otherwise known as an African spurred tortoise, was left behind, and the man who passed away, his wife, was unable to care for the tortoise. My wife was offered to take care of the tortoise and nurse him back to better health and create a better living condition for him. My wife, her name is B, jumped at the chance. She is an avid lover of animals, and if she had unlimited money, as would I, we'd buy as much land as possible and return it to nature. A whole plan we've given thought to almost every day, which doesn't involve simply just buying land. Anyway, so the nameless tortoise was transported to our land, which we have a fair amount of, and an enclosure was built for his safety. There is a canal on one side, which we were afraid he might fall into, and there is a car park on the other, with a lot of other space which would make it hard for us to find him. Our land is raised on a considerable amount, so it is conceivable he could fall off to the lower ridge or more disastrously into the water. Tortoises can't swim, as far as I knew, and that was my basic working knowledge of tortoises. B quickly did research as to the sulcata tortoise's diet, which contains high-fiber fruit, grass, calcium, vitamins, though I hope to get some cuttlefish bones soon, as I've read in various sources this is something they like. So the diet aspect seems to be fairly easy. We live in Thailand, pretty much the temperate zone for sulcata tortoises. Again, that was my working knowledge before research. So here we now became custodians of this magnificent creature, not knowing a whole lot about it, though I had heard Galapagos tortoises, and I correctly recalled hearing that they were the largest tortoises on the planet. But that didn't tell me where these sulcata, these African spurred tortoises, landed on the spectrum. I had no idea. Were sulcata tortoises the second largest tortoise there were on the planet? Where were they native to? And where were Galapagos tortoises native to? And if there were larger tortoises than the sulcata tortoise, but yet smaller than the Galapagos tortoise, I wanted to find out. Which led to a great deal of other questions about one, I did find out that the sulcata African spurred tortoise is the third largest mainland-based tortoise. The second largest is called the Seychelle tortoise, or the Aldabra tortoise, and they live on the Seychelle Islands in the Indian Ocean. And of course, the largest tortoise is the Galapagos tortoise, which lives on the islands. And the key word here are islands, just off of Costa Rica and Venezuela, I think it's Venezuela or Ecuador, on the Pacific coast, and were supposedly discovered by Darwin in the early 19th century, though I'm very certain the natives knew of these creatures. But how did this happen? Because the first question that came to my mind was, tortoises can't swim. Okay, so the first thing I did was I looked to see where the sulcata African spurred tortoise came from, and as far as I could tell from the little bit of research that I did, is they're native to the Sahel region of Africa, and that is basically northern Africa. And let me get a map up of that, and I'll put full details. Anyway, right now, here are pictures of the sulcata tortoise, and the sulcata tortoise, doing a little bit of walking and stuff like that. But interestingly, here is a picture of the Sahel African region, which stretches from the west to east coast of Africa, encompassing many countries. So the Sahel region of geography and climate of Africa, it reaches about 6,000 kilometers, which is around 3,730 miles, from the Atlantic Ocean in the west to the Red Sea in the east. And it's characterized by a hot, semi-arid climate with a short rainy season and a long dry season. The vegetation is primarily grasslands, savanna with low-growing grass, thorny shrubs, and scattered trees like the acacia and the baobab. So basically, the countries that run through this Sahel region are Mauritania, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Chad. So those are the main countries that run through the Sahel region, which is situated between the Sahara in the north and then the more arid lands in the south. So the cicada males and females, they generally burrow about 10 feet. They can burrow up to 10 feet underground. They primarily live on the grassy lowlands in the Sahel region. They're not very good climbers, apparently. Anyway, males can generally weigh up to about 110 pounds, though there are reports of some cicadas weighing over 200 pounds or even up to 250 pounds. Females are smaller, and they weigh between 65 to 75 and occasionally up to 100 pounds. Determining the sex of a sulcata tortoise can be, it's not all that tricky, but you kind of want to wait 15 to 20 years before you can definitively tell between the male and the female. And one of the things that the males have, they have a plastron. The plastron is the shell on the underbelly of the tortoise, and that will be like concave. Because to help for mounting their female companions. So here are pictures of a sulcata male tortoise mounting a female sulcata tortoise in their mating ritual, and you can get a pretty good idea about the size difference between the two. Amazingly, the best diagram I could find online of the size differences between the sulcata, Seychelles, and Galapagos tortoises is this depiction above, which I don't think is quite accurate. One of the most debated topics about tortoises is their life expectancy. So for the sulcata tortoise, it is generally agreed that they live between 50 and 70 years in the wild, of which there are about 100,000 of them. And that puts them on the vulnerable list. But there are sources that say that they can live to be 80 years, and then the maximum recorded lifespan was significantly longer, reaching 150 years. So some sources suggest that it can live to be up to 120, which means nobody really knows. So while you saw that the sulcata tortoise lived on mainland Africa, the Aldabra, or the Seychelles tortoise, which is the second largest tortoise, does not live on the mainland. It lives on islands in the Seychelles, and they are thought to have come from Madagascar. Although this is, all speculative information, as nobody really does know, because if you get into the length of time that tortoises have been around, they've been around 50 million years longer than crocodiles. I did see one interesting characteristic of the Seychelles tortoise, and that is that the males and females rub noses in acts of affection. So here is a walking Aldabra Seychelles tortoise. As you can see, its carapace, or the shell, its top shell, is quite a bit larger than the sulcata. And then if you compare it to the Galapagos tortoise, well, you can see the Galapagos tortoise is quite more, I should say, magnificent, just larger. And in this next picture, you can see human to tortoise size comparison, with necks that extend quite a bit longer than the sulcata or the Seychelles. In the Galapagos Islands, which is just off South America, off Costa Rica, and it is actually on the latitude further south than the Seychelles or the sulcata tortoise, which is kind of interesting because I had to ask a question. How did they get to this remote place? So the answer that I found first was from the Galapagos.org Biodiversity Galapagos Conservancy, and that says that scientists believe that Galapagos tortoises arrived on the islands by drifting from the South American mainland approximately 2 to 3 million years ago. So the most commonly believed explanation as how the Galapagos tortoise arrived on the islands is that, and this is from the International Fund for Animal Welfare, is that they drifted from the South American mainland approximately 2 to 3 million years ago. So according to the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, in 2010 they found that there was a subducted, which means an underwater but not too deep, sort of like a sandbar, which would lead from South America all the way to the Galapagos Islands. And so that's what they found. They didn't say that the tortoises walked across them, but in 2 to 3 million years, which is an awful long time, I wonder if any of the ice ages might have reduced the level of the water and somehow these tortoises walked across. That's just my speculation. I find it a little bit hard to believe that some tortoise jumped on a log and ended up in the Galapagos Islands. And not only in one Galapagos Islands, but in the 4 or 5 other islands that are around it. And upon further research, I found that it says the Galapagos Islands' distinct wildlife, including giant tortoises and finches, have South American origins. These species, including the Galapagos tortoise, are thought to have arrived on the islands from the South American mainland through a combination of rafting on vegetation and swimming, which we all know or have been told that the Galapagos tortoise cannot swim, depending on the species. Genetic studies confirm that the Galapagos tortoise's closest living relative is the Chaco tortoise from Argentina and Paraguay, although it's not a direct ancestor. So if the explanation that the Galapagos tortoises ended up on the Galapagos Islands because they rafted on some seaweed or something like that between 2 and 3 million years ago, I find that it equally interesting, and which actually exacerbates my point, is that the Seychelle Islands are 1,116 miles or 1,800 kilometers away from Madagascar, from where they were supposedly originated. And according to Science on a Sphere, tortoises are land animals, unlike sea turtles, so it floated rather than swam across the ocean. Based on the barnacles that grew on its legs, which would have made it heavier, scientists found that tortoises had floated all the way from Aldabra Atoll in the Seychelles, over 450 miles away. The tortoise likely washed away during a strong monsoon, and it was afloat for several weeks or months along the south equatorial current, with the westerly monsoon winds before ending up on shore. But unlike the Galapagos Islands and most islands in the Pacific and in the Atlantic, the Seychelle Islands are not volcanic islands. They're made of a stone called granite. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's not granite, but it's called granite. And that could have only have come from a mainland source. Most notably, the ancient continent of Gondwana. And we only have an estimate how long ago it broke away. So what it means is that the Seychelle Islands are made of solid rock. They're not made of volcanic up-pushes of lava developing over millennia to form an island. These islands came from a nether source. So in conclusion, I would like to say, I don't think anybody knows how the Galapagos tortoises got to the Galapagos Islands. I think there are other possibilities. 2-3 million years is a very long time. There's ice ages in between. The water levels rose and fell. And same as with the Seychelle Islands. You know, who knows how deep it is? I don't know if there's a ridge leading from Madagascar to the Seychelle Islands, and that could have happened in millions of years. And again, we don't know how high the water rose or how far down the water went from ice ages and stuff like that. The theory that I'm being fed that a lone pregnant tortoise somehow made it to these islands and populated it just isn't working for me. So it might be right. That might be the right explanation, but I think there needs to be a little more research to fully understand how this happens. And it is an important topic because this is the evolution of our planet. And you know, if a Seychelles tortoise could have floated 660 miles or whatever it was, surviving on seaweed, or the Galapagos tortoise could have gone 1,100 or whatever, however long it was, well, then certainly 2 or 3 million years ago, I would imagine that humans probably could have floated on, patches of vegetation and survived and made it around the world. I don't know. I know that nobody else knows. Science hasn't proven it yet, but it is definitely something to think about. So God bless you. Thank you very much for listening to me, and please like and subscribe and give a thumbs up so you'll help out the channel, and thank you very much.